A shiny new condo tower, completely empty. Airport expansion, stuck halfway. Construction, frozen in time. Local shops are shutting down faster than new ones can open. And city officials? They've gone quiet. No answers, no updates. Right now, across Canada, the economic warning lights aren't just blinking, they're blazing red. But while many places are at risk, some cities have already started to break. We're talking about towns clinging too tightly to fossil fuels, regions where the real estate market has turned downright toxic, and cities where young people are packing up and industries are disappearing. If you're living in one of these zones, the fallout isn't coming in 5 years. It could slam into you this year. So let's break down the top 10 collapse zones and see if your city's on the list. Number 10, the Chicago metro area. Picture this: boarded up shops lining what used to be thriving suburbs, downtown office towers with more empty chairs than actual workers. But here's the kicker. Chicago's unraveling isn't just about crime or high taxes. It's something deeper. The city's economic foundation is slowly eroding, quietly, steadily. In just a few years, over 100,000 people have packed up and left. Families are being squeezed out by skyrocketing property taxes, while rising mortgage rates have slammed the brakes on new buyers. Meanwhile, the city's core is still staggering from the remote work shift, and underfunded pensions are quietly bleeding public resources. All of it adds up to a housing market that's not just fragile, it's teetering. And if a national recession hits, it could be the final shove that sends Chicago into a full-on freefall. We're breaking it all down, city by city, fact by fact. And hey, if you're finding this eye-opening, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see this, and don't forget to subscribe. The next city? It's even closer to the brink. Number 9. Inland Empire, California. Welcome to the Inland Empire, a warehouse boomtown that rose fast on the promise of 2-day shipping and dirt-cheap land. But here's the question no one wants to ask. What happens when the trucks stop coming? Stretching across Riverside and San Bernardino counties, the Inland Empire exploded after the pandemic. It was one of the fastest-growing housing markets in the entire country. Developers couldn't pour concrete fast enough. Warehouses popped up like mushrooms. Homes were snatched up the moment they hit the market. But now, the warning lights are flashing everywhere. This region leans hard on logistics, e-commerce, and construction, and all three are suddenly wobbling. Online shopping is slowing. Interest rates? Still painfully high. Amazon has pulled the plug on new warehouse builds. Port traffic is down. Construction jobs? Vanishing. At the same time, home prices soared so fast that many residents are now trapped, holding massive mortgages on homes that are losing value. Right now, nearly 1 in 4 Inland Empire homeowners spends more than half their income just on housing. Affordability has collapsed, and buyers, they've disappeared almost overnight. And that's not all. Commercial vacancies are rising, commutes are getting longer, unemployment is ticking up, population growth is stalling. And here's the haunting part. This has happened before. Back in the 2008 crash, the Inland Empire was ground zero. Foreclosures were among the highest in the country. Entire neighborhoods turned into modern-day ghost towns. Now, economists are starting to whisper, could it happen again? If a region builds its future on constant growth, what's left when the growth stops? Is the Inland Empire about to lead the next housing meltdown in the West, or have the cracks already started to spread? Number 8. The New York City metro area. The skyline still dazzles, the lights still shine, but down at street level, the cracks are growing, and fast. So what happens when hundreds of thousands of people can no longer afford to live in the city that never sleeps? When Wall Street bonuses vanish, sleek commercial towers sit half empty, and even grabbing a $5 coffee feels like a splurge. Here's the reality. The New York City metro area, home to over 20 million people, is far more vulnerable than it looks. Office vacancies have shot past 20%. And while rents in some boroughs remain sky-high, Eviction filings are quietly stacking up in the background. And here's the big risk. If a recession hits, this slow leak could turn into a free fall. Mortgage rates are already locking out buyers. Layoffs are creeping into tech and finance. And it's not just the 5 boroughs anymore. Affluent suburbs in New Jersey, Connecticut, and Westchester, they're starting to shake too. This is a region built on energy, speed, and momentum. But when that momentum stops, the fall isn't just hard, it's brutal. Could America's financial capital also become the epicenter of the next housing crisis? Let's keep going, because the next city, it's already deep in the red. Number 7. Fresno-Kern Region, California. Drive through California's Central Valley and you'll see it. Gleaming new subdivisions stretching to the horizon, billboards promising affordable luxury, and your dream home in the valley. But behind that picture-perfect sales pitch, a storm is building, and it's moving fast. What happens when an entire housing market is built on shaky ground, over-leveraged buyers, unstable jobs, and industries that are one heatwave away from collapse? Welcome to the Fresno-Kern region. On the surface, it looks like a breath of fresh air from California's sky-high housing costs. Bigger lots, cheaper homes, room to grow. But scratch beneath the surface, and the cracks start to show. This area's economy leans hard on agriculture, oil, and logistics, industries known for boom and bust cycles and little long-term security. Kern County is one of the state's top oil producers, but environmental pressure and dwindling demand are hitting hard. Fresno? It relies on seasonal farm labor and public jobs, both especially vulnerable in a downturn. Now add in a construction surge fueled by once low interest rates. It created a housing market that may have grown too fast for its own good. The warning sign? A huge number of homeowners here are severely cost-burdened, spending over half their income just to keep a roof over their heads. If a recession strikes, if jobs disappear or wages drop, foreclosures could spike fast. And once a few homes go under, entire neighborhoods can spiral. We've seen it before. Back in the 2008 crash, the Central Valley was devastated. Fresno and Bakersfield were left with abandoned developments, rows of darkened homes, and collapsing communities. The warnings were ignored then. They're flashing again now. This isn't just about home values dipping. It's about local economies crumbling under the weight of lost opportunity. And if history repeats itself here, it won't be a slow slide. It'll be a full-blown dust storm. Could Fresno and Kern become the next cautionary tale in America's overbuilt, underprepared heartland? Number 6. Gulf Coast, Florida. Picture this: sleek condos perched by the water, palm-lined streets filled with luxury cars. And then, silence. Not from a hurricane, but from something even more unsettling and far more permanent. What happens when the Florida dream becomes too expensive to live and too risky to insure? From Naples to Sarasota to Cape Coral, Florida's Gulf Coast has seen some of the fastest rising home prices in the entire country. It was marketed as a haven, no state income tax, endless sunshine, and red-hot demand from retirees and remote workers. But now, that demand is cracking wide open. Since 2020, home prices shot up more than 60%, but the tide is turning. Inventory is piling up, sellers are slashing prices, and insurance? That's become the breaking point. Premiums are soaring, if you can even get coverage. Some homeowners are being dropped altogether, forcing them onto last resort state plans that can cost thousands each month. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Climate risk is catching up. The Gulf Coast is ground zero for storm surge, rising seas, and relentless heat. As these threats grow more intense and more expensive, major insurers are pulling out, lenders are growing wary, and beachfront property, it's no longer a guaran. Number 5. San Joaquin Valley, California. A line of half-built homes baking under the relentless California sun. Farm towns where the grocery store has shut its doors, but payday loan shops are opening on every corner. This is the San Joaquin Valley, once called the backbone of America's food supply, now quietly bleeding out. What happens when one of the world's most important agricultural regions can no longer sustain itself? Running through the center of California, this valley feeds the nation. But beneath the soil lies one of the most economically fragile regions in the country. Nearly 1 in 5 residents lives below the poverty line. Wages lag far behind the rest of the state. And housing? It exploded in value as buyers fled from San Francisco and Los Angeles during the pandemic, searching for affordability. But now, those buyers are gone. Prices are falling, and the few support beams holding this market up, seasonal farm work, trucking, government aid, are starting to crack. And then there's the next crisis: water. Years of drought, shifting climate patterns, and new groundwater regulations have forced thousands of acres of farmland to go dry. No crops? That means no jobs. No jobs means no income. And no income? That's a death sentence for any housing market. But here's what makes this collapse even more dangerous. There's no safety net. Unlike coastal cities, the San Joaquin Valley doesn't have a booming tech industry to fall back on. There are no international buyers swooping in to prop up real estate. When the market here collapses, it doesn't crash loud. It just goes silent. This isn't just another case of falling home prices. It's a slow-motion collapse in a working-class region with no buffer. And if a recession grips the country, the San Joaquin Valley won't bend under pressure. It could break. And if you're finding this eye-opening, take a second to subscribe and hit like. It helps us keep digging into the overlooked places where the next crisis might already be unfolding.
So let's teed. Gold mine. It might be the next thing to collapse. Jobs in this region are deeply tied to real estate, construction, and tourism, industries that evaporate fast in a downturn. With interest rates still high and flood zone maps being redrawn, even wealthy buyers are starting to pause. In Fort Myers and Punta Gorda, brand new homes are sitting unsold. Condo associations are hiking fees just to stay afloat, literally. One major storm or a sharp economic hit, and entire markets here could spiral. And here's the truth: the Gulf Coast isn't just vulnerable to rising seas. It's vulnerable to a financial flood, one that may not recede this time. And if you're finding this breakdown valuable, hit that like and subscribe button. It's what keeps us bringing you deeper, fact-checked research that others won't touch.
Number 4, New Orleans Metro. The streetcars still glide down St. Charles. Jazz still echoes through the French Quarter. But behind the music and magic, something is quietly coming undone. What happens when a city famous for its resilience begins to run out of lifelines? Right now, the New Orleans Metro is facing a housing crisis, hidden in plain sight. On the surface, it's still a place full of soul, culture, and coastal charm. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find the economic foundation starting to crumble. First, insurance. It's detonating the real estate market. Homeowners across the region are being dropped, denied, or slammed with triple-digit rate hikes. Some can't even find private coverage anymore. Why? Because storms like Hurricane Ida, which caused over $75 billion in damages, are no longer rare. They're becoming the norm. Major insurers are backing away, and fast. The result? Buyers are walking away. Homes sit vacant, and those who do stay, they're getting crushed by costs. Second, population loss. Since 2020, tens of thousands have left the metro. Jobs are limited, especially outside tourism, government, and oil and gas. 3 sectors especially vulnerable to economic shocks. With fewer people staying and even fewer moving in, housing demand is drying up. Third, flood risk and failing infrastructure. Sea levels are rising. The ground is literally sinking. Flood maps are being redrawn. Neighborhoods that were once considered safe, now marked high risk. That means higher insurance, more red tape, and banks less willing to issue loans. Even the suburbs, Metairie, Kenner, Slidell, aren't escaping the pressure. Long commutes, aging infrastructure, rising crime, and a real estate market teetering on both ends. Too expensive to buy, too risky to keep. Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina revealed just how fragile the city's infrastructure really was. But what's happening now? It's slower, quieter, and possibly even more dangerous. This is economic erosion, starting with insurance, spreading through job markets, and ending in empty neighborhoods. If a national recession hits, New Orleans won't just be struggling. It could become the first major U.S. metro where climate risk and economic instability collide into a full-scale housing collapse. Number 3, the Baltimore region. A once thriving port city, now lined with boarded-up row houses, a shrinking tax base, and a housing market that's balancing on a knife's edge. What happens when a city becomes too expensive to repair, but too broken to ignore? Baltimore is staring down a perfect storm. On paper, the outlook seems bright. It's close to Washington, D.C., rich with historic neighborhoods, and billions have already been funneled into redevelopment. But behind the headlines, the reality is far more fragile, propped up by federal jobs, fading legacy industries, and a housing market defined by deep systemic inequality. Let's start here. Over 15,000 homes across Baltimore sit empty, entire blocks abandoned. Despite big plans to rebuild, many of those projects have stalled, over budget, behind schedule, or priced way beyond what local residents can afford. Add in persistent crime, a school system in disarray, and rising insurance costs, especially in aging row house districts already battered by fire and theft, and you have a market that's unraveling from the inside out. Meanwhile, the local economy is losing steam. Job growth? Stalled. Downtown office vacancy? Creeping above 30%. And now with federal budget cuts on the horizon and remote work reducing daily commuters, even the city's most dependable economic engines are starting to sputter. But what makes Baltimore truly vulnerable is the inequality baked into its housing market. Some neighborhoods have seen property values triple, others haven't recovered since the 2008 crash. That kind of unevenness is dangerous because when the next downturn hits, it hits the weakest links first and hardest. If this breakdown opened your eyes, do us a favor. Like, share, and subscribe for more truth-driven reporting. Housing markets across the country are shifting fast, and what's coming next could reshape everything. Stay informed, stay ahead. We're just getting started. Number 2, the Tampa Bay area. A brand new condo overlooking the water, still sitting on the market. Restaurants once packed to the brim now have no wait lists, even on a Saturday night. And those same residents who once bragged about Florida's boom, now they're quietly wondering if it's time to pull out. What happens when paradise becomes too expensive to hold on to? For years, Tampa was the poster child of Florida's explosive growth. Sunshine, no income tax, and a lower cost of living drew people in by the thousands. But that dream, it's starting to unravel. Tampa's housing market is now one of the most overheated in the country. Since 2020, median home prices have soared more than 50%, but wages, they've barely moved. In some areas, it now takes over 9 years of median income to afford the median-priced home. And here's where it gets risky. Investors flooded the market. At one point, nearly 1 in 3 homes was being snapped up by landlords and hedge funds. When the market's hot, they drive up demand. But when things cool down, they vanish, taking the bottom out from under everyone else. Then there's insurance, a ticking time bomb. Premiums in the Tampa Bay area have tripled for some homeowners, thanks to increased storm risk. For many, it's no longer about whether they want to leave. It's about whether they can even afford to stay. Tourism, another economic pillar, is also showing signs of slowing. And retirees, once Tampa's most reliable buyer base, are rethinking their plans as healthcare costs climb and fixed incomes stretch thin. Now stack it all together, a national recession looming, high household debt, evaporating affordability, investor pullback, insurance chaos. This isn't just a dip, it's the early tremors of a potential collapse already in motion. And before we reveal the number 1 spot, take a second to like and subscribe. That's how we keep bringing you the raw, unfiltered reality others gloss over. No hype, just truth. Because in Tampa Bay, the question isn't if the storm is coming, it's whether the foundation can take the hit. Number 1, the Orlando region. The theme parks are packed. Visitor numbers are breaking records. On the surface, Orlando is booming. But behind the magic, people are quietly packing up and leaving. New homes are rising by the hour, yet thousands sit empty. What happens when the fantasy fades in a city built entirely on illusion? Right now, the Orlando region is flashing economic warning signs that few want to acknowledge. Yes, the skyline is expanding. Yes, the tourism stats look impressive. But dig below the glossy numbers and you'll find a housing market standing on shaky ground. Here's why. Over half of Orlando's economy is tied to tourism, entertainment, and hospitality, industries that collapse fast in a recession. When Americans tighten travel budgets or international tourism dips, Orlando doesn't just feel it, it gets hit hard and fast. But this isn't just about job volatility. It's also about how this housing market was built. Rapidly, speculatively, and often without a strong local buyer base. Much of the recent demand came from investors, second home buyers, and people fleeing high-cost metros. And now? Many of those same buyers are hitting the brakes. From 2020 to 2023, home prices in Orlando shot up over 60% while wages barely moved. The result? An affordability crisis. In some zip codes, rent alone consumes more than 40% of household income. And it gets worse. Developers, riding the boom, flooded the market with new construction expecting endless growth. But demand is slowing. Vacancies are rising. Some projects are already being paused or scrapped. Then there's insurance, the same storm risk nightmare seen across Florida. Premiums are spiking, especially in flood-prone areas. And the truth is, Orlando doesn't have a safety net. No diversified industry, no tech boom, no major financial sector. Just theme parks, tourism, and seasonal service jobs. And when those stall, everything stalls. This isn't just a tourist destination. It's a housing market built on unpredictability. And in a national recession, unpredictability becomes a direct threat to survival. Could Orlando be the next Florida hotspot to go ice cold overnight? If the warning signs are right, it's already happening.